Hi, my name is Joy Ladin, and I am delighted to be here to share with you some poems that I've written that relate to the season of Teshuva and to the theme of Ani Lidodi Vidodi Li. I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. They're poems about the intimate and personal divine-human relationship. The first two poems I'm going to read are from my book Psalms, which was written during a very, very dark time in my life when I felt far away from God and actually afraid that I would soon lose the capacity to write poetry at all. And when I thought about what I wanted to do, if this was indeed my last chance to do it, these were the poems I wanted to write. Psalms that were my versions of the Psalms of David that are intimate and anguished and directly address God. So the you in these poems is God. This is called Joy Comes in the Morning. Joy comes in the morning, you say, as though you expect me to believe you. You come in the morning. It's morning, and instead of joy, you come, and you expect, and I expect, and neither of us believes we're anywhere close to joy this morning. Even joy doesn't believe we will ever come to expect her. Every morning, without joy, you come to tell me to expect what doesn't. Mourning with me every morning, as though you expect me to start believing joy comes in the morning, because every morning, unexpected and morning, you come. As you can see, that is a poem of despair, waiting for joy, the pun on my name, but it's also playing on the verse from Torah, joy comes in the morning. And the discovery for me in writing these psalms was that even though God was not going to change the circumstances that were hurting me and scaring me so much, God kept being present, kept showing up, mourning with me. And that led me to be able to write this psalm, which is dedicated to my youngest child, Nausea. You are making me now, right now, the clay of me warm in your hands, the hands of me warmed by your hands that shape them, shape a heart that's never been beaten, skin that shivers in secret places, places that will never be touched, except by the Maker hunched patiently over the stupidity of matter, leaving your mark between my eyes, my hips, and the clay turning slowly in your hands, blinking a little in your light as I learn to forget the tenderness you reveal in the act of making, to confuse the feeling of your fingers moving inside me with smaller, less luminous fingers that will never reach as deep, whose love will never make me something that can think, can suffer, as your love, finger by finger, is making me now. Well, I survived that terrible time, and some years later, a couple of years ago, I realized that I was wondering what I had written all of these poems monologuing to God, and I was wondering what the divine might say in response. And in particular, I was wanting to create poetry through which I could hear the voice of the Shechina, the female aspect of the divine, which in our tradition is present with each of us and all of us and experiences what we experience, but in our Holy Scripture doesn't really get to say anything. These are poems that I wrote to try to hear her. The you in these poems is the human you, not the divine you, the way they were in the Psalms. And the first person is the Shechina. And the poems are created by mixing language from divine monologues in the prophet Isaiah with language taken from articles in Cosmopolitan. This is called Reconstruction. You're lucky to be alive, but you don't feel lucky. You feel like a world on fire. You want to opt out, to be flat, a pocket, 2 pockets of wishful skin instead of a covenant with death. Instead of remembering how you've been violated, a little here, a little there, morning by morning, snare by snare. You wish you could move freely, run and swim, stretch out on a bed, reshape the culture that flattens your desires into tongues of stretched out dough, and make it a place where you don't have to hide, or at least a place of repose where you can feel like more than layers of clothes you're too embarrassed to take off, a place where glory overflows your scars. What if your wish has already come true? What if you could remember? What if you knew that you are my diadem, my fertile valley, my hailstorm of laughter, milk from the breast of my righteousness? I tear apart the tissue of hopelessness that wrote and signed and witnessed your covenant with death, and put you back together, restoring your range of motion, giving you refuge, giving you rest. Little by little you hear my voice. Little by little you listen. Instead of the body you never wanted, you see land you can plant, and water, nuance, sexuality, summer. Instead of lies, grain turning into bread. Where you hoped at most to see nothing, justice ripening like a fig, you're ready to swallow as soon as it fills your hand. And so, as you can see, this is the Shechina is saying that in a way our prayers for restoration and for divine presence, from her perspective, have already been answered. In the act of longing for her, she's already there. She exists outside of time and space. When she looks at us, she sees every moment of our lives simultaneously. And she is always talking to us at each of those moments, knowing us from inside out, and summoning us to realize that she's there and experience the transformation that it means to realize that she's there and to hear her and respond to her. The last poem that I like to read from this sequence is her specific summons to us to actively transform our relation to her and to the divine presence. It's called the G-Spot. You're tired of trying to find me, of having to try, of sticking your fingers inside explanations and interpretations, dictionaries and temples, holiness, wholeness, once upon a times. You're tired of feeling like a borderline, a salvation-adjacent mass of tissue, a Google search, a reality toy. Sometimes you feel like a burning light, but you never get to feel like blessing, or a Sabbath being kept, or a prayer that's being answered, or even like a spot, a ribbed, springy nub in which you're sure I'm taking pleasure. Instead of binding yourself to me, you want me to make come-hither motions, to be a zone where you always feel good, and someone who gets your inadequacies and frustrations, everlasting love, meaning, connection, and also the reason for suffering, damnation, and shame. I am. I'm right where you think I'm supposed to be, in rapture, in climax, in understanding, in the giant emotional burden, the absurdity of being, and also when you feel like nothing, like no other thing, not an elevator or a button, or even a form of discomfort like having to pee. The question you should be asking isn't if or what or where I am. It's whether you're ready to know yourself to be my where and when, my intimate zone, my anatomy. It's whether you say yes, you want my righteousness to become your righteousness, my pleasure, your pleasure, your I am, my I am, to realize that your now is always my forever. Shana Tova.